Ladies and gentlemen, please take your places. The first panel discussion of the day, European and Regional Integration, is chaired by the Deputy Prime Minister for European Affairs, Bojan Maričić.
Dobar den na svita.
Hello, everybody.
Chairing this very important panel. Before we start in the essence of discussion, thanks to Mr. Besimi, but also I would like to invite everybody to come on the stage. Deputy Prime Minister Slavica Grkovska, in charge of good governance policies. Minister of Finance is already here. Bojan Stoyanovski, the chair of the Finance and Budget Parliamentary Committee. Jia Jingyi, regional country director of the World Bank. Mr. Eric Mayer, charge d'affaires in the US Embassy in North Macedonia. Ben Nopnau, deputy head of delegation of the EU to the Republic of North Macedonia, and that's it. I suppose we are all here. Europe, yes, Europe now. It's the title of the conference, and I think it cannot be more timely and more in place. I'll try to give a brief introduction, so my colleagues can then make most of the points. This year, Mr. Besimi, this is, as you mentioned, a tradition that not only is serving to keep the tradition, but to grow from one year to another. And I think this event has grown into an excellent forum for discussion on very important topics. The focus on the European integration and economic prosperity is something that is inevitably linked throughout the process of negotiations and accession to the EU, but also afterwards. The politics, law, and economy have always been the three main ingredients of the European Union, based on values, but also based on how to manage the economy better and how to grow and develop the member states. We have the chance to see, I'll focus on the three main issues: the outcomes and the benefits of the screening process as an introduction in the chapter negotiations. Number two, the growth plan that was mentioned several times in the introductory speeches, and the regional cooperation as an inevitable key element of our European integration. President of the European Commission has mentioned three major things in her speech in State of Union 2 days ago: vision, leadership, and hard work. So vision, leadership, and hard work are the core of our accession process. The screening process is coming close to the end. It should finish until the end of this year, end of November, beginning of December. And it has given us such a good picture, such a good image of where we stand and what we should do. The first cluster, fundamentals, has for the first time embedded economic criteria. The economic criteria are treated as core part of the fundamentals of the European Union. They cannot work without the political criteria, without the aspects of the rule of law, the aspects of functioning of the institutions, effective public procurement, but it has given us view of where we stand. Public procurement rules, public procurement procedures, statistics, fiscal control, financial control are our strong sides according to the screening. Doesn't mean that we are ideal, doesn't mean that we don't have shortcomings and a lot more to do, but it is a good start, better than even for those countries that negotiate for a long time. But also the dynamic of the screening process and new negotiations have given us a space and opportunity for the first time, according to the new methodology, to declare areas of accelerated accession. This means that the European Union gives us for the first time an opportunity to join some of the economic policies, particularly policies from the internal market, even before we become member state of the European Union. That is not given, that is not taken for granted, but it is a process which should result with the growth plan that should be presented in October, 16th of October in Tirana during the summit of the EU and Western Balkans and Berlin Process Summit. The active role of the European Commission means that they have grasped and we have grasped the most of the accession process and the most of the new methodology. Accelerated accession is giving us a chance to get the benefits of the, some benefits of the membership even before the membership. This is happening for the first time, and this is the benefit of the new methodology that we need to make the most of. We have drafted some thoughts on this, and we have already shared this with the European Commission. I can tell you that in the areas of agriculture, in the areas of IT sector and digital industry, and in a few other areas, we are ready to ask for joining the common market as a part of the accelerated accession. And we will be discussing this with the European Commission these days. Next week, there is a conference in Vilnius that will define more in details the sketches of the growth plan. But our position is that North Macedonia has a lot to offer and that we can do a lot in this process. So this growth plan is not only nice words, it's not only good intentions. It means that the accession process is not anymore a zero-sum game. It's not that you're either a member state or not. If you're a member state, you're getting all the benefits. If you're not, you're getting nothing. This gives opportunities to us to develop better and sooner and to diminish the discrepancies between now our current references and our current numbers in development and economy with the member states of the EU. The gap will be diminished, and once we get into the EU, we'll be more prepared and better. Finally, I'll finish by mentioning the regional cooperation. I think that it is either overestimated or underestimated in the process. Overestimation comes when we take it as a substitute of the membership in the EU, which is not. So when we say, forget about EU, let's work on Berlin process only or Open Balkan only or what all the other formats, I think it's a mistake. It's also a mistake if we say that it doesn't matter what we do at the regional stage, then we don't care about the regional cooperation, that we only wait for the membership in the EU. I think that regional cooperation is a must, so we can demonstrate that we are able to cooperate with 6 of our neighbors or 5 of our neighbors, 6 in total, in the European level as a foreplay, as an introduction to prove that we can actually play on the European market and European stage tomorrow when we become member state of the European Union. And finally, it cannot be substituted for the EU, but it is a phase which all of our countries will benefit from, and all of our countries are benefiting from. And by removing the barriers in economy, by removing barriers in mobility, and by enabling our people opportunities to live and develop businesses in our region and not necessarily leaving the region in order to live better. I think it's enough for introduction. Thank you so much. And I think that discussions like this can always bring new values in the paradigm, and using all the instruments North Macedonia can achieve the membership of the European Union by 2030. Thank you. According to the list of speakers, I would pass the floor to Madam Slavica Grkovska, Deputy Prime Minister for Good Governance Policies.
Thank you, Your Excellencies, dear colleagues, dear participants on today's event. It is an honor to be here today as we discuss topics of great significance for our country's future. At the beginning, I would like to say that as we embark on the journey of integration into the European Union, it becomes even more crucial to emphasize the importance of good governance in achieving this goal. I would like to shed light on some key elements in this regard, including the main challenges we face in strengthening the fundamentals of good governance. First and foremost, let us acknowledge that good governance is the essence of any successful country, particularly in the context of EU integration. It encompasses principles of transparency, accountability, efficiency and inclusiveness, but also integrity as a basic value. By holding to these principles, we ensure that our actions and decisions are carried out in a manner that is fair, just, and beneficial for all citizens. And by practicing these principles and values, we can say that we can achieve Europe now, here, at this very moment, without waiting for implementing all the reforms. Because it strengthens the bonds between the government and its people, fostering trust, stability, and democratic value. And it affects the overall trust in the society, something that becomes a very problematic issue, even in the more developed countries. One of the key challenges lies in the consolidation of our democratic institutions at every level. Some of these challenges are resolved, but many of them stay ahead of us. When we discuss these issues, we must not forget the backlash we had until 2016, when we were being considered as a captured state, stuck in isolation. But in the past years, it is a fact that we have a free and a fair election. It is a fact that the media freedom are very much advanced. It is a fact that institutions are more open and transparent, and we strive to improve it day by day. But what we need to do is strong and decisive improvement in the rule of law. We need to strengthen our judiciary system and overcome numerous problems that we have been noted in all relevant reports and assessments. And we also need to succeed in achieving the goal for a reliable public administration, which will effectively and efficiently fulfill its role as a service for the citizens and companies. Because these are the pillars upon which good governance is built. By doing so, we create a solid foundation, not just for progress in the economy, but also for prosperity at all social levels. And that paves the way for successful integration into EU as a main strategic goal for our generation and for those who will come after us. Harmonizing our legislation and enforcing its implementation is essential for creating an environment that is conducive to economic growth, investment, and protection of human rights. Improving the business climate, enhancing the rule of law, and fighting against organized crime and corruption are crucial elements for a successful integration. Yet, it is important to recognize that these goals cannot be achieved by one branch of government, not by one institution or one political leader. These are the most important goals for all of us, and we must use the potential of the whole society. Collaboration between various stakeholders, including the government, civil society, the private sector, but also the opposition, is paramount. By working together, we can leverage our collective strengths, expertise, and resources to address the challenges at hand. This collaboration can result in greater efficiency, better policy making, and enhanced resilience against obstacles, which we must admit are many and of different nature. But with commitment and focused energy, we can manage to overcome even those problems which look like impossible mission. Because nothing comes from apathy, nothing can be built with cynicism. In this regard, we need to keep in mind that it is essential to adopt a holistic approach that takes into account the interdependence of various reforms. Our institutional and structural reforms must be interconnected, reinforcing and supporting one another. My role in the government is to coordinate important processes such as digital transformation of society and coordination of institutions involved in anti-corruption policies. Therefore, I'm deeply aware that our aims can be achieved through careful planning, coordination, and the involvement of all relevant factors. By doing so, we ensure that our efforts are both effective and sustainable, creating a solid framework for good governance that would withstand the test of time. It brings good to our people, it brings good to our institutions and businesses. As we move forward, it is also crucial that we continue to support and strengthen the European project and to continuously remind our citizens of the transformative power of EU integration, because it remains a force for positive change. It has brought together many different nations, fostered economic growth, and promoted democratic values. The transformative power of EU integration can and should continue to shape our lives and the world we live in. Having all this in mind, yes or no to Europe should not be a question at all. But how soon is now is the real question, and I would say it should be addressed both to the European Union leaders, but especially to the populists on our political scene, who their own narrow interests do not hesitate to damage the integration process and therefore the overall progress of our citizens.
Thank you, Madam Grkovska, Deputy Prime Minister in charge of good governance policies. Now I would pass the floor on to Mr. Bojan Stoyanovski, Chair on the Finance and Budgetary Parliamentary Committee. From the opposition, it's a good value that you are attending this conference, and I have particular pleasure to pass you on the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Maricic. Thank you for the opportunity to be able to speak at such an event. Dear Excellencies, dear participants, I think it's very important for events such as these to be leveraged because they're only done on an annual basis. We don't want them to be floskles of something that's going to be repeated next year. We want to make an analysis of the progress that can happen in this year. Unfortunately, my speech will be a little bit more different from others because I think that we need to look at things in a more real way. I think that this is accepted by those who are majority in this country, like the citizens or the economic chambers. And let's get closer to the European economic systems in such a time. We're the first in the corruption, and we're a country that has a lot of issues. Let's admit that. If we start from the public debt, which in the 6 years was increased by 50%, we have a high inflation, which is way above the Eurozones in the countries in the region. If we take a look at the capital investment realization, that in the 9th month was not over 50%. So in the project proposal that came to the Assembly that we have to discuss, 300 million less we have from the capital investments. That's how much we should take out a loan for. That shows bad management of the situation that I think that is then added to the bad management of the crisis. And I'll confirm this with arguments because the whole essence of what I'm saying is kind of interconnected with the essence. This bad management of the crisis contributes to us in this country having gray economy. And all these parameters that I just outlined can be managed if institutions decide in a more high quality way to manage them. And anything that's basically the essence of the event to increase the level is with each year. Instead of creating ways of practicing a system that will counter gray economy, we currently have the current tax reform, and this tax reform punishes the ones that are disciplined at the expense of those who do not pay their taxes. And in this country, you have great areas, basically whole towns, be it regions in the capital of the city where you have tax evasion, where people do not pay their taxes. And when we talk about institutional integration, I mean from the aspect of the EU integration, 3 aspects are key. First, the fast flow of passengers and goods. That's the customs administration that's in charge. Then countering the gray economy, which we have to admit that in this country is huge and is around 600 million annual income is lost due to this gray economy as a country. And that's the Public Revenue Office, which is shown. And just to mention a statement by the Nobel Prize Kuhlman at an event in Skopje, that he mentioned that the infrastructure in Skopje has to be improved for this flow to be more high quality, for which the Ministry of Transport and Communications is in charge. And when you collect all of this as a summary, you get to a conclusion that this is a huge problem that can be addressed only if we address it by the ones that are in charge of managing these institutions. And one of the biggest problems that the economy has, and all economic subjects, the insufficient quality management of the administration itself. If you ask me personally, I think that we can try this try to do this in these 3 steps. The first, if all legal solutions in this country where the assembly is important, is done through consensus and dialogue. That doesn't mean that we should impose economic subjects to respect things, but we should adopt legal solutions in dialogue with them, with the consumer association. They will be interested to collaborate. They don't want to pay, but the country will want them to pay. But we see that there's good cohesion if we merge these 2 things and we achieve consensus, a trade. The second thing that I think is key, that's the focus on domestic reforms. We say that we need to start chapters that adhere to the Copenhagen principles, but no one is stopping us to give a stimulus for the reforms here. The problems that we have, be it in economy, finance, health, was not caused by an external force. It was done by ourselves. And we can fulfill this task in a domestic way to do these reforms, to raise the level so that we can reach the European standard, be it the competitiveness of our companies, be it the readiness of our system, be it the fulfillment of various standards that will be necessary for us to be an equal member of the EU. Because it's not only an essence of being part of that family, it's also to be high quality, so that you become an internal part as a company and not like an export. The third thing that is essentially important that should be done, there's a reform in the management of the administration. There should be a speedy administration based on digital shortening of unnecessary procedures that the economy, citizens are facing right now. Because you can see by talking to the chambers, if you adopt reforms in dialogue, there's a problem with particular procedures which are too long, too lengthy, and unnecessary. And that's why I think that next time when we get together here again, regardless of the roles, we can discuss what has changed in the next 12 months and how all these good governance and integration of the system towards the standards of the EU we have done, at least in some steps and in some areas. Thank you very much.
Now we go further on with the representative of the World Bank, the regional country director, Zhao Qingyu.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here to participate in today's discussion of European and regional integration. This subject is particularly relevant in today's world. After we have seen continued trade disruption that has profoundly impacted the global welfare, threatening to erode the very hard-won development gains over the last few decades. So economic integration, which can be reflected in much better access to export market and also to investment opportunities, is going to be essential for small open economies like the Western Balkans to grow and to have sustained growth. As Europe slows due to prolonged high inflation, tighter financial conditions, as well as weaker investment sentiment, policymakers are looking for reforms that could stimulate growth at the same time without relying too much on the almost exhausted fiscal space. During the past continuous crisis, fiscal pressure has been so high for most of the Western Balkan countries, so the countries are facing extreme pressure on fiscal balances. So looking for such structural reforms that could generate growth and jobs without putting such pressure is actually key in the coming period. Closer economic integration in the region is one such structural reform that could have positive impact on growth and job prospect. So for Western Balkans, on the one hand, small economies, small open economies, and relatively fragmented, these are very hard for countries to achieve the economy of scale. At the same time, the proximity to the European Union and to the European market, coupled with potential for reshoring of trade and investment, gives these regions a special and unique advantage. EU has been the largest trading partner and the source of foreign direct investment for Western Balkan countries. It accounts for almost 70% of foreign trade and FDI. It also offers a market of more than 400 million relatively high-income consumers. So trade in Western Balkans has grown in the last few decades steadily. However, it falls short of its potential to benefit from the EU single market. So the World Bank research has done the recent research to try to quantify some of the potential benefit for further economic integration. And so I'd like to share some of the preliminary results from this research. The study shows that coordinated policy and investment for regional integration can generate significant economy-wide gain. And so some of the examples very telling in this from this research. First, a simple reduction of the waiting time at the border by 3 hours could lead to a gain which is equivalent to lowering tariff by 2% across the board in Western Balkan countries. That, by the way, that 3-hour reduction is the expected result from a deployment of national single window for trade. So that's the first conclusion, which I found very telling and interesting. Second is that implementation of further trade facilitation reform could generate as much as 3% of per capita GDP in the coming decades for some of the Balkan countries. Third, accession to European Union would amplify welfare gain by additional 6% in the Balkans. At the same time, neighboring countries such as Romania, Bulgaria, and Hungary would also benefit from the increased trade with the Western Balkan countries. Finally, continued investment in transport infrastructure has the potential for an additional further boost of real income by 7% in the case of EU accession. So these research findings and this analytical result hopefully will inform the policy discussion and debate in terms of promoting further economic integration. The bank has been supporting trade and transport facilitation within the Western Balkan countries so far and introducing the national single window for trade, investing in transport facilities, as well as to support regulatory reforms. North Macedonia was one of the first countries that joined the Trade and Transport Facilitation Program a few years ago. It has shown some results and positive result and achievement. However, much more could be done in this region and to generate higher returns. At the request of the Albanian Authority, which will host the next Balkan summit under the Berlin process, we have been discussing with all Western Balkan countries about the opportunity to take the trade and transport reforms to the next level, going beyond integration within and among the Western Balkan countries, but between the Western Balkan countries and the neighboring EU countries. So this is hopefully we will build on the past engagement in this area and would focus on the EU side and the integration with the European Union. A lot still needs to be discussed with the countries about exactly what to do to actually implement the next phase of reform. A few potential elements that we are currently thinking about, I'd like to just share some of the ideas. So what we are now called the TTFP 2.0, which is the next generation of trade and transport facilitation. First is the second generation trade facilitation, which is meant to be aligned with EU trade procedures. These could include operationalization of the single window and the interoperability between the European Union and Western Balkan countries about ultimate trade process, cross-border paperless import and export measures, a series of interventions that could support this. The second element of such reform could include investment in the national quality system that would make sure that goods that export to the European market meets the EU standard and technical requirement. The third aspect could include improvement of transport of logistics and performance, such as indicating an intelligent monitoring system along the key corridors and as well as the port. Some of the ports. And fourth is about investing in medium and small scale investment that close the connectivity gaps. And finally, it would be great to support countries' further reform by providing technical and analytical support that can support SOE reform in the transport sector, better management and maintenance of the transport system, deepen trade agreement, as well as measures to mobilize private capital. So we hope and we think this TTFP tool should be a component of a much broader reform that the countries will adopt together with a wide range of development partners, EBRD, EIB, as well as regional bodies such as Transport Community, SEFF, as well as RCC. So I think there will be a lot of opportunity to discuss this range of reforms in the coming weeks and months. Very much look forward to this opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. The next speaker is coming from the U.S. Embassy in Skopje, Chargé d'Affaires, Mr. Eric Mayer. Eric, I pass the floor to you.
Thank you. And it's a pleasure to be back at the Skopje Economic Finance Forum this year. Encouraging North Macedonia's progress towards European integration is one of our top strategic priorities for our country. It's not just the best path forward. It's, in reality, the only path forward. It offers a future with security and economic opportunities that this country needs and deserves. With Russia's unjust war continuing in Ukraine, the importance of EU integration for North Macedonia's security cannot be overstated. The war in Ukraine has triggered supply shocks, destabilized markets and prices, hindered economic recovery, and it has made it more difficult for the government to deliver on its policies. While North Macedonia survived last winter's energy crisis, it continues to battle high inflation and the debilitating effects on the country's most vulnerable communities. From a strictly commercial perspective, EU integration will provide domestic businesses with access to more than 450 million people, with a combined GDP of $16 billion. The EU is already North Macedonia's largest trading partner, accounting for 65% of its total trade. Integration would likely boost these numbers, benefiting domestic businesses and consumers alike. Integration will lead to the modernization of manufacturing to meet EU environmental standards and generate new markets for environmental goods and services. And it's important to remember that the benefits to integration are not one-sided. The EU also stands to gain a lot from North Macedonia joining the European Union. North Macedonia is part of Europe, and the EU directly benefits from adding more stable and prosperous countries to its community. Further integration will add to the EU's richness and diversity, a hallmark of the European Union and one of its key strengths. Despite these clear economic and security benefits, the constitutional amendments necessary for moving forward with EU accession have been met with fierce opposition from different groups. Opponents have expressed concerns that even if they amend the Constitution, other requests will follow. While I understand these concerns, they are really complaints about the process rather than arguments against EU integration, and they should not derail the process. Ultimately, North Macedonia needs to decide if it wants to be a part of the EU. While the EU accession process has been long and difficult, recent polls indicate most citizens continue to support EU accession, even if they have concerns about the amendment process. I encourage the country to choose the right path to seize this historic opportunity and to pass the constitutional amendments. Another important U.S. strategic priority in North Macedonia is the fight against corruption. Corruption has a corrosive effect on the economy and society. It wastes scarce resources, exacerbates inequality, drives youth emigration, and reduces trust in the government. North Macedonia's leaders must show strong, tangible anti-corruption results. It should strengthen institutional independence and curb political interference, especially in the judiciary, which is essential to meeting EU accession goals and building citizen trust in government. The path we choose is important, but so is how we get there. It is important to not only get to the right answer, but also to do it in the right way. In closing, let me say that when we discuss European integration, we often frame it in terms of geopolitical strategy, economic growth, or regional stability. But for me, the issue is more personal. Before I joined the U.S. State Department, I worked for a major U.S. airline, which allowed me to travel frequently, and I took advantage very often of the travel perks, traveling to remote parts of the United States and different corners of the world. I developed an appreciation for the importance of connecting people. Ultimately, when I think of EU integration, I don't think in terms of grand strategy or GDP statistics, but of meeting people and the connections that we can and should make. EU integration will allow North Macedonia to strengthen those relationships critical to the country's future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Eric. The next speaker comes from the EU delegation in Skopje, Deputy Head of Delegation, Ben Nuknau.
Thank you very much. Dobro utre. Thank you for having me here. I would like to concentrate my observations on two of the topics that were put forward to the panel, mainly how trade and regional integration with the Western Balkan region and the EU can be accelerated, and secondly, how this relates with the fundamentals and aspects of good governance issues. And let me maybe start to speak to the fundamental theme of the conference, which is Europe. Yes, and Europe now, highlighting first of all the opportunities that an EU accession will bring to North Macedonia. The EU is the most prosperous and most deeply integrated regional bloc worldwide. It is a single market with the four freedoms for factors of production, goods, services, capital, and persons. And this has helped EU member states to achieve unprecedented gains in market access, in specialization, economic development, and ultimately prosperity for its citizens. And for a small country like the Republic of North Macedonia, domestic market size is always a limiting factor for the growth of private sector and for attracting an investment. And the integration with the Western Balkan region would increase the market access, the market available market by the factor 7, but with the EU actually by the factor of 1,300. So this is actually enormous potential and opportunities for private sector. I'm echoing some of the remarks made previously also by the Deputy Prime Minister that the common regional market can be seen as a stepping stone for the eventual integration with the EU, especially if it is done on the basis of EU norms and standards. And so we see this as a very promising way forward. Obviously, the country has already liberalized trade flows with the EU under the Stabilization Association Agreement. And already today, integration with EU value chains is a reality, but much more can be done. And the industry of North Macedonia can move up in value chains and producing more sophisticated parts and capture bigger parts of this value chains, which immediately translates into more income and more jobs in the country. Trade integration today is not only about the absence of tariffs and quotas. It's especially when you talk about a single market, we are talking about harmonizing norms and standards and enabling companies to produce the same products for a larger market. We also talk about cutting red tape, about using the same systems and the same procedures. And there we come immediately to the second question of governance issues. Another issue that I would like to raise about integrating is services. We have seen, if you compare North Macedonia with other, let's say, member states like Estonia, that the integration on the good side is already at the same level. But if you look at the services trade, there is something to be done in this area. So now, how to accelerate Europe now? How to deepen integration and bring North Macedonia closer to the region and to the EU? And as the Commissioner has already said in his keynote speech, the President of the Commission, von der Leyen, presented a Western Balkan Growth Plan at the GLOBSEC 2023 forum in Bratislava, which basically presents 4 pillars. One is to bring the Western Balkans closer to the EU single market already now. Secondly, deepening regional integration with the Western Balkan regions. Third, to accelerate fundamental reforms as a sort of to accompany this process. And fourth, to increase pre-accession funding. The Commission President has proposed fast-tracking some of the benefits of the single market, like, for example, participation in the e.g. digital single market, e-commerce regulation and other things. The Western Balkan countries could be associated more closely to the shaping of policies and regulations of the single market already ahead of eventual membership. And again, the EU President has offered to increase our efforts to accompany the reforms in the countries by that are meant to build capacity and institution building in the Western Balkan countries. So there's now internal consultations ongoing in the EU institutions about how this can concretely be done. And obviously, this will also require that the countries that will benefit from EU single market access ahead of time, they will also have to comply with the obligations. Now, we have to think about how to accelerate effective integration, because we make sure that private sector operators actually use the opportunities. And so there we talk about the reform of regulations, we talk about strengthening good governance, building institutions and the capacity of public administrations. And I should start by recognizing that obviously the country has already done a great deal of things, and the business environment in place is already very investor friendly. And the results are evident with a high inflow of FDI that North Macedonia attracts, which is by international standards very high. And also, if you look at the tendency of exports to the EU, I mean, it has doubled in about 10 years, the overall figure of exports to the EU. Now, turning to the elements which in our view would require significant additional efforts to ensure that the country becomes still more attractive for investors and makes a headway on its way to eventual EU accession. What we would qualify as fundamental reforms, we are looking at 4 main areas. One is the predictability of the business environment. There needs to be transparency on changes in the business environment. There need to be transition periods so that business can actually prepare for these changes. The second, and that has already been raised as well, is the absence or the control of corruption. We need to make sure that there is a fair playing ground for all operators. Then the third one is the effective, fast, and fair and independent justice system, which operators need to seek redress when they feel unfairly treated. And finally, we need to strengthen public institution to manage this system, the regulations, the reform process, but also to provide public services to the citizens. And I'm thinking there also about this question of mismatch of skills and the education system reforms that the country is undertaken also with the help of EU funding. I believe these are all essential issues to address on the way of North Macedonia towards a regional and EU integration and later on accession. But they are also important for your way towards economic prosperity per se. And we believe it requires a strong national consensus and political will, consensus for this overarching vision and political will to progress, to make progress for the country on this way. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ben. As a final speaker of this panel, last but definitely not least, the host of the conference, Mr. Fatmir Besimi, Minister of Finance of North Macedonia.
Thank you, Bojan. As we are running out of time for this panel, I'll try to be brief. And already we can smell the coffee outside. Coffee break is already in. Bojan, Commissioner Hahn referred to something. He reminded me of something when he was in Skopje during his capacity as EU Commissioner for Enlargement. Many challenges at that time, and yet we are here talking about this. And therefore, he was one of our honorable guests to open this, not only in a capacity as a budget and finance, but also his legacy on EU enlargement and also for our country moving forward. So I'm very grateful to that. But the other point that I want to make here, that Bojan is facing all these challenges. Bojan here next to me, and we have Bojan again next there, which I'm very grateful. But I will disclose one secret of Bojan, not here, the next Bojan. That's why it's important, this conference, that we grow. When I said not incident, not a coincidence, but it's becoming to a prominence, something that we talk about preparation for EU, joining the EU. We need a lot of efforts before joining, and it continues. It's not a destination, it's a journey. And Bojan has a lot of preparations today, not only for this panel, but I understood he has a great event tomorrow on his personal decision, life decision. He's getting married tomorrow. And he came. I'm very grateful that he made it, because what I said at the beginning, this conference brings together all political spectrum and giving perspectives, which today we confirm that it's not a matter whether we want EU or when, because we put this in the slogan. Yes, we want EU, and time is now. The challenge and what we expect from this conference and also from this debate is how to make it more effective, as it was mentioned here from Ben. But also, I noted here what Eric said. It's the only path forward. And please, wherever we use, EU is not our destination. It's our common journey, because we will join and together we'll continue the journey with other member states of the EU. And when I say this, it's linked very much to what is going on right now. We are very much interlinked with European economy and European politics and all the rest in geopolitical development what is going. We saw during the COVID pandemics, we saw during the financial crisis earlier, we saw now during the energy crisis, inflation, it all is reflected to our economy, and we face the same challenges. And being part of this bigger union with all these common values that we share anyway in our region and in our country, We can bring more to Europe about the values, sharing the same values, but it's not a secret that we also are looking forward for our economic interests and prosperity. And it's very legitimate to strive and being more ambitious. So we have some figures Prime Minister referred to about regional cooperation and economic integration for the country and the region. So we will benefit both increasing trade with Europe, integrating to the European market, but what is also important that the topic of this panel is European and regional integration will increase regional integration. Currently, trade of the region with EU is 65%, but trade among countries in the region is less than 15%. Once we are part of EU, we can go for more investments, a common market, and all these freedom of movement that we discussed too. So, sorry, Bojan, for revealing this secret. I think it was not something wrong to say. You probably wanted to surprise tomorrow about this, but the intelligence worked out, so the information leaked. And also, Bojan, I want to thank Bojan because he is in charge now of the portfolio European affairs and helped a lot for design of the topic of this conference that we ran 2 months ago, a conference on academic debate together about a similar topic, but with academicians. So thank you once again. Maybe I misused this panel to add something more what I missed during the welcome notes, but it was very important for the conference, and looking forward for coffee break and enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you, Bojan.
Thank you. I think we are out of time. One more applause for the speakers and have a great conference.
Dear guests, thank you for actively listening and participating in this panel discussion. It is time for a coffee break to gain more energy to continue with the upcoming topics.